Dear students, welcome back. So let's continue with the laser. And today I'm going to take up the both types of the laser as per your syllabus. The first one is your carbon dioxide laser and second one is your semiconductor laser. So let us see in detail both the lasers, their principle, construction and working. So let's start with. So first we have the principle, construction and working of carbon dioxide laser. So let us see what is this principle. First line says it is a 4 energy state laser. Now let's try to understand what is the meaning of the 4 energy state. So in the pumping I had shown you the 2 energy state. That energy state I had shown you is your E1 and E2. With your 2 energy state we cannot have the laser beam if we are going, because it will violate the uncertainty principle. So from 2 energy state we cannot have the laser beam. For the laser beam at least we require the 3 energy states, correct? So anything more than 3 energy state will give you the laser. 2 energy state was only for your explaining that how the atoms or electron is moving from the ground energy state to the excited energy state when we are pumping. So now let us see how it is based on the 4 energy states. So here we have a material in which we are saying that we have the 4 energy states. So this I have called as E1. The excited state as it is we are calling is E2. The third state we are calling as the metastable state, about which I have told you in detail, right? So third energy state is your metastable state, which is very close to your excited energy state. And fourth one is another energy state which is very close to your ground energy state. The distance between E1 and E4 is so much so that electron cannot jump from E1 to E4 at a normal temperature. But if you are going to increase the temperature, it may jump. So we have to control the temperature in such a way that atoms are not going to jump to the electronic state E4, and E4 is more or less completely empty. You don't have any atoms in E4. Now, as we have understood that most of the atoms are concentrated in your ground energy state. So here you have the energy. So most of your atoms are concentrated in your ground energy state. We are dealing here with the carbon dioxide laser. So what we require to do, firstly we have to create the population inversion. So to create the population inversion, here we are going to pump this atom from the ground energy state to excited energy state. So with the pumping it will be going to your excited energy state. So this is how it is moving. How it is moving with the pumping. Of course here we are going to use the electrical pumping because it's a gas laser, right? So this is how the atoms are coming over there. Then here the atoms are not stable. Within 10 to the minus 8 to 10 to the minus 10 second it will be coming back to your ground energy state. But what we have done is one energy state E3 has been inserted, which is very close to your E2. So the atoms from the excited state will come to the E3 with the non-radiative transitions. It is so close that almost there is no radiation of energy, right? So with the non-radiative transitions, the atoms are coming to your E3. So it has come to your E3. So you have hardly any atoms left there in your E2. And now you see what I had told you, E4 you don't have any atoms. So naturally between E3 and E4 you are getting the population inversion. In E4 you have the large number of the atoms, and E4 you don't have any atoms. So in the E3 you have the large number of the atoms which has come with the non-radiative transition, and E4 there is no atoms. So we'll have the population inversion between E3 and E4. So here you are getting the between E3 and E4 you will have the population inversion. So if I'm going to give any photonic energy to any of these atoms, so under the action of or under the radiation of this photonic energy, this atom is going to lose the energy, right? And this atom will be coming back to E4, and between this E3 and E4 you will have the stimulated emission. So between E3 and E4 you are getting the stimulated emission, and you are getting the photonic energy in between the E3 and E4. Now here the atoms have got stuck in the E4. Now how we have to bring back the atoms from E4 to E1? For this you have to go to the construction. In the laser tube of the any gas laser, and of course for the carbon dioxide laser also, the laser tube in which you are filling the gas is being kept very thin. right? Why it is being kept very thin? So that these atoms in the energy state E4 is lying within the vibrational distance of your wall of the tube. So here the atom is vibrating, so atom will have the, let us suppose, vibration like this, right? And in this way, if it is coming over here or if it is coming over here, it is going to make the collision with the wall of the tube. So here and here it is going to make the collision, and by making the collision it is going to lose the energy, and again it will be coming back to your E1, and where it is again available for your pumping. Again the pumping process you can start, and the atoms will be again going back to your E2 excited energy state. So this cycle continues, and therefore it will be a continuous laser. You will not have the pulse laser, and atom is never getting exhausted in your ground energy state E1. So this is the basic working principle of this laser. So here I have explained you the first line. It is your 4 energy state laser. So I hope you must have understood why we are calling the 4 energy state, because here we have 4 energy, E1, E2, E3 and E4. Therefore it is called 4 energy state laser. Alright, let's see the next line. The electrical pumping is required for its operation. As I already told you, atoms is to be pumped from your ground energy state to excited energy state, and therefore we are using the electrical pumping. The width of the tube is kept very small, so as to bring back the atoms into the ground state by making the collision with the wall of the laser. So just I have explained you. So all your gas laser and of course the carbon dioxide laser also, the diameter of the tube will be very small. It is a continuous laser, and polarized light can be produced. This we'll see in detail how we can produce the polarized light from this laser, right? So here we can produce the polarized light. All right, so this is the basic principle of this. Here I have not deleted anything. Whatever I have written, I am leaving this so you can have the reference while you are going through this video. Let's move further. Now we are coming to the construction of this. So as I explained you in the previous slide, here we have the laser tube. So this part that you are saying is your laser tube. So here this is your laser tube, right? This laser tube has been filled up with the 3 gases. Those are your carbon dioxide, nitrogen and helium. In a certain ratio it has been filled up in this tube. So in this tube has been filled up with these 3 gases, that is carbon dioxide, helium and nitrogen. It will have the diameter of this will be very thin, as you have understood, but its length comparatively will be very large, right? So diameter will be small and length will be very large. Now at the two end, as we understand that we have to put the 2 mirrors. One of the mirror should be fully reflecting and another mirror should be your partially reflecting. So here again we have given this your mirror. So at one end we have given this your fully reflecting mirror, and at other end here you have the partially reflecting mirror. Here in this mirror, through this mirror only we are putting a Brewster window, using which we can make the light polarize. So at the end of this laser tube we are putting the Brewster window through which we can polarize the light. Now naturally, to ionize the gas, because for the pumping you require to ionize the gas, so here we have given the power supply. So this is for the connection for the power supply, and through this power supply the gas is going to be ionized. So this is the basic construction. So let's see all the dimensions of the length and width, all those things. So length, typical length is 5 meters. So as I told you, compared to its width, the length is very large. The diameter of the tube is 2.5 centimeter. Now you see, length is 5 meter and diameter, not the radius. Diameter is 2.5 centimeter. Discharge is produced by the DC excitation. So here you have taken the power supply. This is what we are calling as the DC excitation. Resonator, these 2 mirrors that you have kept at the end is called as the resonator. So resonator is a silicon mirror coated with the aluminum, is used as a confocal resonant cavity. So it is your confocal resonant cavity. The ends of the discharge tube are fitted with a sodium chloride Brewster window, so that the laser light generated will be polarized. So when it is going to pass through the Brewster window, right, the light is getting polarized. So Brewster window that we have given is only to make the light polarized. So this is the construction. So we have the length, we have the diameter, we have the discharge through the power supply, and we have put the resonator at the 2 ends, and we have also applied the Brewster window so that the light can be polarized. The laser beam which we are producing is a polarized beam. So this was your construction. Now let us start the working of this laser. Alright, The optimum value of the partial pressure varies with the diameter of the tube. All right, so we are continuing a bit more with the construction. So optimal value of the partial pressure. Now here we have the three gases. What are those gases? Carbon dioxide, helium, and neon. So these gases have been filled up with a particular partial pressure. So value of the partial pressure I have not written, because this may vary with the diameter of the tube. So there I have taken 2.5 centimeter as the diameter. It does not mean the diameter will always remain fixed. So as per the diameter, we can vary the pressure, relative pressure can be varied, and that we are calling as the partial pressure. To remove the dissociation products such as carbon dioxide, which would contaminate the laser, the continuous flow of the gas mixture is maintained in the tube, right? So now the partial pressure should be maintained with whatever the partial pressure you had initially given of the carbon dioxide, helium, and air. That is required to be maintained to the continuous supply from the outside to the vacuum pump, right? So this is your construction of your laser. Now we are starting the working of this laser. Now this is your carbon dioxide laser. So carbon dioxide, when you are exciting the carbon dioxide molecule, then it is being found in the three energy states. Those three energy states are called the symmetric, asymmetric, and bending. So here I have represented this with the diagram. So one I am calling as the symmetric, another I am calling as the antisymmetric, and third I am calling as the bonding. Let's try to understand this. In case of symmetric, as you can see, the both carbon is fixed, carbon is at the center, carbon is fixed, but both the oxygen is vibrating in opposite direction. So one oxygen is going in this way and another oxygen is going in this way. So if your carbon dioxide molecule is going to vibrate in this way, then this type of the vibration will call symmetric vibration. Now this vibration depends upon whatever the bond you have between the carbon and oxygen, or whatever the molecule you are taking, what is the nature of the bond that you have, and what is the mass of the atoms in the molecule. So depending upon that, you can have the different type of the vibrations. So here, depending upon the bonds and the mass of the carbon and oxygen, we have the three types, and all the three types will have the different value of the energy. So here you have nearly 1300, right, per centimeter square. This is your value of the energy. Then again the next one is coming your asymmetric. Now in this case, you see the one of the oxygen and one of the carbon is moving in the opposite direction, and other oxygen is moving in other direction. That is what you can say in nutshell. The two oxygen is moving in the same direction. Now you see here, the two oxygen are moving in the same direction, and carbon is moving opposite to both. Carbon is moving opposite to both, and that is called your asymmetric, right? So what is happening? Two of the oxygen, both the oxygen molecule or atom of that molecule is moving in the same direction, but the carbon is moving in the opposite direction, and therefore what we'll call this your asymmetric. Of course, its energy is higher than the symmetric. And the third is your bending. In the case of the bending, what is happening? The carbon molecule is going in one direction and both the oxygen is going in the other direction, right? So both the oxygen is going in the other direction, as you can see over there, and because of that, what is happening? It is going to bend, and therefore it is called your bending vibration, right? So this is your type of the vibration that we have in case of carbon. So what we are saying, carbon molecule is going to available in the three of the electronic state. What are those state? Symmetric, antisymmetric or asymmetric, and bending, right? And therefore, and all of these have got the different energy, and with respect to this, we are going to understand how the carbon dioxide laser is going to work. All right, so now let us try to understand what I have written. Molecules have large and varied family of the vibration mode. So different molecules will have the different type of the mode, which are resonance, that depend on the mass and the bending of the atoms of the molecules. Sorry, bonding of the atoms in the molecule. So whatever the bonding it is, and what is the mass of that atom in that molecule, depending upon that, we may have the various type of the vibration, various modes of the vibration. So here we have, for example, here we have three modes of the vibration. Similarly, if you are going to take the water molecule, right, it will have again the three or four types of the vibration, because water and carbon dioxide in many ways are similar in the structure. The number of the distinct mode increases with the number of the atoms in the molecule. So number of the atoms in the molecule is increasing, right? So number of the vibration is also going to increase. So here, for example, here we have 3. In the hydrogen, if you are taking, you have only 2. So depending upon the number of the atoms, right, the vibrations can increase, right? Each mode has its own precise excitation energy. So as I'm mentioning here, and the value of the energy, so each mode will have the precise value of the energy, right? So the value of the energy is written there, and all are all the adjacent level of a given modes are separated by that amount of the energy. So let us suppose if the carbon dioxide is going to be excited, so it will have in the 3 energy state. So 1, 2 and 3. So one of the mode is over here, other mode is over here, and third mode is over here. If this is representing the energy, if this is representing the energy, so this is your E. So if I'm representing this with the E on the y-axis, right, and this I'm just saying the vibration of the atoms. So what we are saying, this is your one mode, right? Another mode has another energy, and third mode have got the third energy. So what we are saying, it is going to be available at the different levels. So let us suppose I am calling as this is your mu1, this is your mu2, and this is your mu3. So mu1, mu2, mu3 are your 3 energy states, right? And this is how it is going to be shown in your spectrum, right? So this is what we are going to use there while we are going to deal with. So now let's move to the next one. Now this is what I have represented the diagram. So first let me explain you with the carbon dioxide. So here in this carbon dioxide, this is your first one. I have taken your ground energy state, and this is your what we are calling this is your E1. In the first slide only I told you this is your 4 energy state laser. So this is your ground energy state, right? And now we have E2, E3, leave it the E2 for a moment. Then this is your excited energy state E3, right? This is your E4. Here you have the E4, and here you have E5. So E3 is here, and this is your bending. This is your bending mode. Here you have the E4. This is your symmetric mode, and this is your asymmetric mode, right? Anti-symmetric mode. So in the previous slide I had shown you asymmetric mode will have the highest value of the energy, and therefore it has come over here, right? So similarly I have shown you the other 2 modes. This is symmetric mode, and this is your vibrational mode. And this is one of the energy state which is very, very close to your ground energy state, where effectively there are no atoms. In the E2 is completely vacant, you don't have any atoms, right? So if you are going to excite, the atoms are available in your E3 mode, E4 mode, and E5 mode. There you have in the 3 energy states, the atom is getting distributed if we are going to give the energy to your molecule, carbon dioxide molecule. How we are going to give the molecule energy to the molecule? Naturally we are going to give to the pumping. Whatever the pumping we are going to do, the electrical pumping we are going to do. And in the electrical pumping, what we have the 2 other molecules, that is your nitrogen and hydrogen, right? What is the role and helium also? What is the role of your nitrogen? So whenever you are providing the discharge, first nitrogen is getting ionized, and of course you will have the liberation of the electrons, right? Those electrons are going to move very fast, right, under the high potential, and they are in turn is going to make the collision with your carbon dioxide molecule, and carbon dioxide in turn is getting excited, and they are going to move into the different energy state, that is your symmetric, asymmetric, and bending, right? So this is the basic principle. So nitrogen is getting ionized, and nitrogen is helping in moving the atoms of carbon dioxide into the different excited state. So this is what I have tried to explain you. The nitrogen atoms are excited through the electrical pumping mechanism. The process represent, that is nitrogen, right, has been ionized. So nitrogen is moving to the excited state. Nitrogen is moving to the excited state, right? And it is liberating an electron. It is liberating an electron. So that process has been shown over here. So firstly, we have given the energy. So energy, we have given the DC energy for the ionization. Nitrogen has got ionized and nitrogen has moved to your excited state. So here you have the nitrogen. This I am calling for your nitrogen mechanism only, and this I am calling as new one. This for only the nitrogen. All right. So where it has moved? It has moved to its own excited state. Right. Now here you can see nitrogen atoms here is going to make the energy excited energy state of the nitrogen is very close to the symmetric asymmetric mode of your carbon dioxide. This is your nu 3. Nu 3 is asymmetric mode of your carbon dioxide. So what we are saying, the excited state of the nitrogen is very close to asymmetric mode of your carbon dioxide. So what it will do, the nitrogen will transfer its energy to your asymmetric mode carbon dioxide, and then nitrogen will give its energy to those carbon dioxide atoms, and nitrogen will come back to your ground energy state. Let's try to write this mechanism. Now what we are saying, nitrogen molecule in the excited state collide with the carbon dioxide atoms in the ground state and excite to the higher electronic, vibrational and rotational level. The process has been represented like this, right? So nitrogen is making the collision, and with the collision the atom, carbon dioxide atoms, is moving to your 3 energy state, right? And this is what equation has been represented. It is going to all these 3, not only the symmetric. It is going to the symmetric, it is going to the asymmetric, and it is going to the bending. In all the 3 states, the atom is moving. So this is the second line I have written. The third line, you see, since the excitation level of the nitrogen is very close to E5. Now here you see what I have told you. Here this excitation state of the nitrogen is very close to your this E5. This is your E5, right? Very close to E5. So population there is going to increase. So there you will have highest number of the population. So in your E5 energy state, more and more number of the atoms will be coming because it is getting the maximum energy, right? It is getting the maximum energy, and therefore highest number of the atoms is getting concentrated in your E5 energy state. So therefore what is happening? In the E5 you have the large number of the atoms is accumulating, right? In E3 you have very less number of the atoms, and in the E4 also you have very less number of the atoms. So what is happening between E5 and E3, and between E5 and E4 you have the population inversion. What we have between the E5 and E4 and E5 and E3 both, you have got the population inversion. So between where you have population inversion, between these two, and again between these two you have the population inversion. So here you have the chance to stimulate. So if you are going to give the energy exactly difference to E5 minus E3, then this photonic energy is going to release, that is, this is going to be stimulated. And if you are going to give the energy, right, between E5 and E4, then 10.6 micrometer, this photonic energy is going to be released, right? So this is what I have tried to explain you. So let us see again. So as soon as the population inversion is reached, any of the spontaneously emitted photon will trigger the laser action in the tube. So naturally, so what I have explained you here, this is your E5, this is your E5. So let's go step by step. This is your E5, okay, and here you have E4, here you have E4, and very close to this only, here you have your E3. So you have the population inversion between E5 and E4, and you have the population inversion between E5 and E3. This is your E3 again, so therefore I am writing it here. This is your E3. So you have got the population inversion between E5 and E4, and E5 and E3. This is how you have got the population inversion. So now if there is a spontaneous emission between E5 and E4, that spontaneously emitted photon is going to stimulate the other atoms in this, right? And the photonic energy we are getting here, right? So we are getting one set of the photonic energy between these two. Similarly, if there is spontaneous emission between E5 and E4, then another photon spontaneously emitted photon is released, and this photon is going to stimulate other one over here. So again we are getting the stimulated emitted energy between E5 and E3. So what we are saying, there are the two type of the laser transition possible, one between E5 and E4 and another between E5 and E3. So this is what I have written. So transition from E5 to E4, right? This will produce a laser beam of 10.6 micrometer. So this you should remember, it is going to produce you, if it is coming from E5 to E4, then it is going to produce 10.6 micrometer, and if it is coming from E5 to E3, then it is going to produce 9.6 micrometer laser beam. So here we are getting two type of the beam. One is of the 10.6 micrometer and that is your 9.6 micrometer. Normally 10.6 micrometer transition is more intense than 9.6 micrometer transition. The power output from this laser is nearly 10 kilowatt. So this you should remember, right? The temperature of the lasing medium is kept under control so that E2 level is not populated with the atoms. Now, as I had told you, so now over here, now you see what is happening. The atoms have come over here, and here the atoms have got stuck, right? Now here, what we require to do here, here we have given some absorbent. The temperature of this is going to be absorbed, and from this E3, the atoms will be coming to E2, where there is no atom. Now therefore the temperature must be very, very controlled, so that from your ground energy state, no atom should jump over here. No atom should jump over here. So how the atoms is coming over here? Here the E3 atoms, the atoms which has got stuck in your E3 or E4, the energy of this is being absorbed by the coolant. So coolant we are continuously circulating, right, with the help of the helium. So those energies is going to be absorbed with the coolant, and these atoms will be coming back to your E2, where you don't have the atoms. So from both of these, the atoms will be coming to your E2, and it is going to stuck over here in the E2. Now from the E2, how is it coming there? So this is why I have written here, the temperature of the lasing medium is kept under control, so that E2 level is not populated with the atom. So ground energy state atom should not jump over there. Of course, it will be coming from the excitations from E4 and E3, but it should not be jumping from E1, ground energy state. This is why we are controlling the temperature. All right, and coolant we are using, so that from the E4 and E3, the atoms should be coming back to your E2 by absorbing those energy. All right. Now next one, the atoms with the stimulated emission accumulate in E4 and E3 energy levels. There is non-derivative transition from E3 to E2. From E4 to E3, it will come off without any non-derivative, because they are very, very close, right? And helium gas mixed with the nitrogen and carbon dioxide absorb the energy of the atoms in E3. So if they have come to E3, so here its energy is being absorbed with the helium, right? With the helium we have mixed with the nitrogen and carbon dioxide. So helium will be used as a coolant. So this is going to absorb the energy, and then it is going to come to your E2 energy level. So this is how it has come to the E2 energy level. From E2 to E1, how it is coming? From E2 to E1, now here it is, this atom in the E2 is going to make the collision with the wall of the tube, and during this collision it will be losing its energy, and again it will be coming back to your E1, and where it is again available for your pumping. So you continue your pumping, and it will again go back to your excited state in the similar way as we have discussed. So this is the working of your carbon dioxide laser. All right. So I hope you must have understood. I will recommend you that before you go to the next laser, you see the video at least 2 or 3 times, so that you should understand it. All right. Now let us work for the semiconductor laser. Let us see how it works. Now, when a diode is forward biased, holes from the P region are injected into the N region and the electrons from the N region are injected to the P regions. Let's try to understand. Let us suppose this is your PN junction. So this one side is your P type. Let us suppose this is your P type and this is your N type, right? Other side is your N type and you have forward biased, right? So moment you have forward bias, here you are getting a depletion zone from where the holes are getting injected on this side and the electrons are getting injected on this side, and here you have the combination of electron and holes, and of course they can combine them right together and the photonic energy is going to be released. So when a diode is forward biased, holes from the P region are injected into the N region and the electrons from the N region are injected to the P regions. All right, so what is happening? The electrons and holes are present in the same region. They may radiatively recombine, that is, electron falls into the holes and emit the photon with the energy of the band gap. So this is what I have explained you. So what I explain you is here, see, if you are taking the PN junction, so from one side to other side it has crossed over, and therefore if this is your, let us suppose, N side and this is your P side, this is your P side, so this is your depletion zone which is contained with both P and N. So of course the electron has jumped over P side and holes has jumped over N side, and here you have got a depletion zone, right, where the electron and holes are meeting to each other, right, and of course then electron is fusing with the holes, and moment electron is fusing with the holes, a photonic energy is generated, right, and how much energy will be generated, it depends what is the band gap. So depending upon the band gap, the photonic energy is going to generate. This is called the spontaneous emission. So the energy that has got generated is called your spontaneous emission. All right. Under the suitable condition, electrons and holes may coexist in the same area for quite some time. Now what I am telling you, that here in the depletion zone, before they are going to combine, that is, electron is going to fall into the trap of the hole, or hole is coming inside the electron, the electron and holes in the depletion zone are also going to exist separately for a very small time of the order of the microsecond, that is 10 to the minus 6 second. They will be available separately before they are going to recombine to generate the photonic energy, right? Within this time, that is in the interval of 10 to the minus 6 second, if you can stimulate this electron and holes, right, then the recombination process can be stimulated, and you can get your stimulated energy instead of a spontaneous energy. You can get the stimulated energy in the medium. All right, let's move further. So if a photon of exactly the right frequency happens, along with this time, recombination may be stimulated by photon. So this is what I have explained you. This causes another photon of the same frequency to be emitted with the same direction, polarization and phase as the first photon. So that is your stimulated emission that we have already seen, right? So within the 10 to the minus 6 second, right, if you are giving the right type of your photonic energy, then you can stimulate those combination, and the stimulated energy can be obtained in that medium. And moment you are getting the stimulated energy, the direction, the polarization and phase of the photon can be controlled, and of course it will be in the direction of the photonic energy which you are providing, right? So this is the basic principle of your semiconductor laser, right? So what is happening, what is the nutshell, what is the basic principle? That the electrons and holes are going to fuse, right? Before they are going to fuse by themselves, within that time, if we are going to give a right photonic energy, right, then this energy can be stimulated, that the fusion process can be stimulated, and we can get the energy in the medium by stimulated emission. And that is, in nutshell, is the principle of your semiconductor laser. Now let us come to the working of this laser. Now this laser is just like your paper. Just you imagine a paper which is your some type of the thick paper you have, right? So here this is just like your plain paper, as I'm showing you over here. This is just like a plain paper, right? So it is long paper but thickness is less, right? So just you try to understand this. So this is your paper. So this is one paper that I have taken, and it has got the two surface. One is the top surface and another is your bottom surface. So top surface has been doped with your one type of that, let us suppose with the N type, and the bottom side has been doped with the P type. So in between that, what you are getting, the top side has been doped with one, let us suppose the N type, and the bottom we have doped with the P type. So in between, what you are getting a junction. So this white that I have represented, the white becomes your junction. So it is somewhere in between your paper, right? So this is how you can imagine, right? So this is what I have taken over here. The bottom that you can see here, the bottom that has been taken, this one is just a sink, right, to absorb the energy, right, and to give the electrical connection. All right. So now what we are going to do, this is your top of the paper, and again here you have the bottom of the paper. So from the top of the paper to the bottom of the paper, we have given the electrical connection. Now here you have got the two sides. One side is this, and again exactly the opposite side of this. You can imagine the cube where you are taking the two sides. One is this, another is this. So these two sides have been polished to make this as a resonator, right? Just like you are putting the mirror. So here we are not putting the mirror separately. The two ends itself has been polished so that it is acting like a resonator, right? And other two face which is left out has been rough so that no electron or holes should be passed through that. So this is your six faces. Two faces you have given the electrical connection. Two faces you have polished, right, to make your resonator, and other two faces has been done rough so that no electrons or holes would eject through that. So this is your basic principle construction of this semiconductor laser. So let us see what I have written. In a laser diode, the semiconductor crystal is fashioned in a shape somewhat like a piece of paper, very thin in one direction and rectangular in other two. So why the thickness side is very thin and other two side is long. So you can just imagine a paper. That is the types that we can take. The top of the crystal is N-doped and the bottom is P-doped, resulting in a large flat of P-N junction. So just your entire paper has become a P-N junction. The two ends of the crystal have been cleaved to form a perfectly smooth parallel edges, and two reflecting parallel edges are called the Fabry-Perot cavity. So what we have done, the two faces has been polished so that it is just acting like your mirror, and we are calling this as a resonator or cavity, Fabry-Perot cavity. The photons emitted in precisely the right direction will reflect several times from each end face before they are emitted. Of course, naturally you will have between the resonator, the atoms are or photonic energy is going to do to and fro. So it will be doing several times to and fro before it is going to emit, and you are getting the lasing as, right? Each time they pass through the cavity, the light is amplified by a stimulated emission. So what is happening if this becomes your cavity, and here you have the huge number of the electrons and holes. So every time the photon is moving, you're getting the stimulated, then again it will be returning back, again the stimulation. So each types it is doing to and fro, you are getting the gain of the light. So this is the working of your resonator that we have seen in the detail. So this is what is being written over there. So the two polished surface that you have, through that the electrons or photonic energy is doing many times up and down, right? And every time it is doing up and down or to and fro, it is gaining the energy. Hence, if there is more amplification than loss, the diode begins laze. Naturally, before the laser beam is coming out, the amplification, that is gain, should be more than the loss. Every time it is going to and fro, there will be loss also. But moment the lasing action will only start when the amplification is more than the loss, and then it is to start lasing. What is the meaning of the lasing? Lasing, that does mean the laser beam will start coming out of the cavity, right? The wavelength emitted is a function of the band gap, right? Naturally, the energy E equal to h nu. So it will be a function of the band gap between P and N regions energy levels. No photon with the higher energy than band gap will be emitted. So naturally, no energy or no photonic energy is available with the higher than the band gap. So whatever be the band gap between the P and N, depending upon that band gap, that type of the energy is going to be emitted. So this is your principle of your semiconductor laser. Now let us see the working of this laser. One of example is your gallium arsenide. Gallium, GaAs, gallium arsenide is one of your such laser. It is heavily doped semiconductor. I don't understand whether I really don't know whether you understand by the meaning of the doping. So let us briefly try to understand this. Let us suppose I am taking any P type or N type, any one type I have taken, right? You can imagine any one. So let us suppose here it has got the two energy state, right? So let us suppose here we have taken the E1 and here we have taken E2, right? So it will have the energy gap, right? And this is your E2 minus E1 is your called the energy gap, and that we are representing by Eg. Then here we will have the Fermi energy. Fermi level energy in case of the semiconductor, intrinsic semiconductor, lies exactly between your E1 and E2. So here you have the Fermi energy. What we are calling this is your Fermi energy EF. It is your in between. Fermi energy, you can imagine, is just like your center of mass. Now, center of mass does mean, let us suppose here you have a rod, right, of the length L. So its center of mass will be exactly in between if this rod is completely uniform, right? But let us suppose on one side we have added some mass, then what will happen? The center of mass will start moving towards this side, right? If we are going to give more mass over here, then again it will move slightly, right? So exactly this way your Fermi energy is going to move. Now what is happening? Let us suppose this semiconductor is going to be doped, right? So let us suppose we have taken any semiconductor, and here we are going to dope depending upon whether it's your N-type semiconductor or P-type semiconductor. So intrinsic semiconductor I have taken, and so this is a pure semiconductor. No doping is there. Now I have started doping. So I can dope with the trivalent atoms, or I can dope with the pentavalent atoms. So let us suppose I am going to dope with the trivalent atoms with this. Now moment I am going to move dope with the trivalent, the Fermi energy will start moving up or down, right, depending upon what type of the semiconductor we have, right? So here if I am taking the here trivalent, it does mean we are giving one electron extra, right? Because it will have the one band will be left. So naturally it will start, that is one of the electron is what is happening here. You have, let us suppose this is your silicon, right? So silicon, you have the 4 electrons. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and here I have taken any trivalent atom. So let us suppose tellurium we have taken. So here you have 3, 1, 2, and 3. So 3, it is going to be joined with the 3 of them. 3 electrons of the silicon has been joined with them. 1 electron has been left out, right? So each trivalent element you are going to dope, 1 electron is getting extra, which will be free, right? So then what will happening? This electron, the number of the electron in this system is increasing than the number of the holes. What is happening? The number of the electrons will become more than the number of the holes. Okay. So again, let us try to say this. So what I had told you, this is your E1. This is what I had told you. This is your E1. So now this is your conduction band. Let us suppose this is your conduction band and this is your valence band. This is your valence band and that is your conduction band. So what will happen? The electron remains in the conduction band and holes remains in the valence band. If it is your semiconductor, valence will remain in the valence electron will remain, that holes will remain in the valence bands. Now, since I have doped with the trivalent, number of the electrons over here is increasing. In the conduction band, number of the electrons is increasing. So slowly the Fermi energy will start moving up. The Fermi energy will start moving up. If the value of doping is very, very large, the Fermi energy will move inside your conduction band. If the number of dopings, that is the number of the trivalent that we are going to dope over here is going to be very large, then the number of the conduction electron will become very, very large and Fermi energy will move inside your conduction band. So Fermi energy will come over here. So Fermi energy will move according to the number of the dopings that we have done. Similarly, if you are going to dope with the pentavalent, then the Fermi level will start moving downward and very large number of the pentavalent atoms if you have given, then it will move inside your valence band, right? So if you have taken the p-n junction and very heavily doped, both the p side and n side has been very, very heavily doped, then the Fermi energy on p side will inside your valence band and n side it will inside your conduction band, right? So this is how your Fermi energy will lie. All right, I hope you may have understood this, right? So Fermi energy in case of your intrinsic semiconductor will remain exactly in between, but in your extrinsic semiconductor, that if you are going to dope with then the Fermi energy is going to vary its position. It is going to shift its position, right? And it can move towards your conduction band or it can move towards your valence band. Now let us try to understand this further. So what the first line I am saying, one of the example of the semiconductor laser is gallium oxide. It is heavily doped semiconductor. So naturally we are going with this principle that I have explained you, right? Now in N region, its N region is formed by the heavily doping with the tellurium concentration of 3 into 10 power 18 to 5 into 10 power 18 atom per centimeter cube. So normally you have 10 power 18 to 10 power 19 atoms per centimeter cube, and then you have dope with 3 to 10 power 18 to 10 power 5 into 10 power 18 atoms per centimeter cube. So you can imagine you have just dope as many number of your intrinsic conductors was there, that many number of the impurity you have doped. So number of the impurity is almost equal to the number of your intrinsic atoms. So naturally then what will happen? The Fermi energy will not remain in between. Fermi energy is going to move. Similarly, if P region is formed by the doping the zinc concentration of around 10 to the power 19 atoms per centimeter cube. So both the P regions and N regions have been heavily doped. Now you see this diagram. So what I have done, this is your left hand side, this is your P regions, this is your P regions here, this is your P regions, right? That is your P types. So here you see this is your conduction band of your P regions, this is your conduction band, and this is your valence band of your P regions. And now you see we have so heavily doped that is Fermi energy has come inside your valence band in the P side. Similarly, on the N side also we have so heavily doped that now this is your N side, the right hand side is your N side, right? Here you have got the conduction band for the N type semiconductor, and here you have got your valence band. Now what is happening? It has been again so heavily doped that towards the N side the electron has moved inside your Fermi energy. The Fermi energy has moved inside the conduction band. So Fermi energy Fn, here you see EFn, has moved inside your conduction band. Why it has moved inside? Why Fermi energy inside? Because it is heavily doped. What is the range of the doping? 3 into 10 power 18 to 5 into 10 power 18 in the N region, and 10 power 19 number of the atoms in p regions, right? And this is how it has been shown over here. Naturally, this is your depletion zone if you are going to give the forward bias. So the electron will be start moving, electrons and holes will start fusing towards the junction, right? So p type will move towards the n type will move towards the p type, and here you have got the fusion level, and let us suppose the width of that fusion level is your d. So what is happening over here? Here they are, electrons and holes are meeting and they are going to fuse. Moment the electrons and holes are going to move, right? Then what is happening? These two will fuse, and moment they are going to fuse, then photonic energy is going to be generated. This is how the photonic energy is coming out. So this is the construction of your construction of your laser. Let's see further. When high dope p and n regions are joined at the atomic level to form p-n junction, the equilibrium is attained only when the equalization of the Fermi level takes place. Now, I had shown you there where was the Fermi level. In the p types, Fermi level was inside your conduction band, and in the valence band, and in case of n type, it was inside your conduction band. Now, what will happen? The moment the fusion is going to start, both the side, the Fermi level will come at one level. So now here you see, the moment the fusion has started, the Fermi level has both the side toward the p and n, it has come in one side, right? So your conduction band initially was somewhere here. So from here your conduction band has moved over here, right? So that it should go inside your conduction band, right? And the Fermi level both side is getting equalized. So this is what has been written over here. When high dope p and n regions are joined at the atomic level to form p-n junction, the equilibrium is attained only when the equilibrium of the Fermi level takes place. Equilibrium of Fermi level takes place does mean both the side the Fermi level has come in one level. In this case, the Fermi level is pushed inside the conduction band in n type, right? As you can see, the Fermi level in the n type has come inside your conduction band, as you can see here. So push inside the conduction band, and p types, it has been pushed towards your p type, that is the valence band. So here Fermi level has come inside the valence band, right? To make your Fermi level in the equilibrium state. When the junction is forward biased at low voltage, the electron and holes combines and cause the spontaneous emission. Right? All right, because you'll have only few number of the fusions, and that is going to fuse, and that fuse energy we are going to use for the stimulations, right? So, but when the forward voltage reaches its threshold value, the carrier concentration rises to very high value. So moment it is going to your threshold value of the voltage, the concentration of the carrier concentration rise to the very high value, because from both the side the fusions start gaining up, and therefore the fusion process also start proportionately, right? As a result, the region D, what was the region D? Depletion region contains large number of the electrons in the conduction band and large number of the holes in the valence band. All right. So what is happening then? The population inversion is achieved. So because of that, a population inversion is going to achieve. The recombination of the electron and the holes lead to the spontaneous emission and is stimulate the other to emit the radiation. All right. So since large number of the electrons and holes are available, right? So a spontaneously emitted photon is going to do the stimulation, and to and fro it will start happening, and all of your electrons and holes are going to be stimulated. In turn, they are going to be fused, and the photonic energy is getting released. In case of the gallium arsenide, the energy gap in such a way that you will be getting the wavelength nearly in the range of 9,000 angstrom, which is in your IR region. So here the laser beam which is getting generated will be in your IR region. So in this way, today I have completed your both type of the laser, that is your carbon dioxide laser and your semiconductor laser, and in this way all the types of the laser is over. Now in the next class we are going to the applications of the laser, and after that we'll have the numerical problem on that, right? That is on the laser. Thank you very much.